5 extinctions have already turned Earth's story by force. Seas drained, reefs went silent, deserts spread, and an asteroid finished an age. Each collapse was not a single blow, but a convergence. Climate, volcanism, impacts, arriving together when resilience was thinnest. Cycles, not anomalies. Now, look up. The sky of 2025 is crowded. Multiple close asteroid passes, 7 bright comets in the same narrow window, solar storms tearing tails into ribbons, and an interstellar traveller, 3i Atlas, threading silently through the commotion. Each piece is defensible on its own. Together they look like alignment, the kind that mattered before. So the question isn't, do extinctions happen? We know they do. It's whether the next one has already begun, and how close the tipping point is when convergences return. If this pattern makes you pause, tap like so others see it. Tell me in the comments which past extinction warns us most, and subscribe, because this story is still unfolding, and we may be inside the opening chapter. The skies of late 2025 are restless. Instead of the expected trickle of unremarkable asteroids and dim comets, the solar system has become crowded with visitors. Night after night, the Sky Survey networks release fresh bulletins. Another near-Earth object crossing our orbital path, another comet brightening in the telescopes, another trajectory adjusted to reflect just how close the pass will be. The normal rhythm of discovery has been replaced with something insistent, almost impatient. The alerts come so quickly that tracking teams barely finish one calculation before the next demands their attention. Asteroids have always passed by, of course. Thousands cross Earth's neighbourhood every year. Most are small, fragments only meters across, too faint for all but the most sensitive instruments. But the current wave has been different. September alone saw multiple close passes within lunar distance, objects large enough to cause real devastation if they had intersected our atmosphere instead of grazing past. One rock the size of a stadium slid through the Earth-Moon system just beyond the orbit of our satellite, close enough to remind us that the space between safe passage and catastrophe can be measured in margins too small for comfort. Then came the comets. Usually a year offers 1 or 2 faint spectacles, a modest object brightening just enough to be captured by dedicated amateurs, a tail barely visible under dark skies. But 2025 has filled the sky with them. 7 bright comets are converging in the same span of months, their names added to the watch lists like a growing cast of characters. Pan-STARRS, the Sentinel, Swan, the Ultraviolet Wanderer, Stereo, the Twin-Eyed Observer, Atlas K1 and Atlas G3, carrying the Titan's name twice, Lemon, Sharp, and Faint. Neat, the old surveyor turned messenger. Each on its own would be an occasion for observers to celebrate. Together they form something stranger, a celestial swarm, a concentration that looks less like coincidence and more like choreography. And through this crowd moves a visitor unlike the rest. The surveys call it 3i Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object cut across our solar system. Unlike the comets born in the Oort cloud or Kuiper belt, this body comes from elsewhere. A star system that is not our own, carrying material formed under different suns. Its trajectory is hyperbolic, which means it is not bound to return. It will enter, curve around our star, and depart into the darkness again. A one-time passage, fleeting but significant, coinciding with the busiest sky astronomers have ever recorded. The sun itself has not been silent during this parade. Entering its maximum cycle, it lashes the system with storms and flares, magnetic tempests that tear comet tails into ragged filaments and drive auroras toward latitudes unaccustomed to their glow. To stand beneath the sky this season is to feel both wonder and unease. Streaks of light above, geomagnetic storms below. The sensation that Earth is caught in the middle of something larger than chance. On graphs and spreadsheets, it can be explained away. Survey sensitivity has improved dramatically in the last decade. Automated systems scan the sky every night, revealing faint bodies that would once have remained invisible. The increase in discoveries, some argue, is only the natural result of sharper tools, but improved detection alone does not explain clustering. When you chart the arrivals across time, the pattern stands out. Most years, the dots scatter evenly across the page. This year, they cluster in the same narrow column, arrivals packed into weeks instead of decades. 7 comets bright enough to register in amateur telescopes. Multiple asteroids passing close enough to warrant detailed risk analysis. 1 interstellar traveller threaded among them. Clustering is not supposed to look this deliberate. Astronomers use the term with caution, reminding each other that randomness produces patterns all the time. Flip a coin long enough and streaks of heads will appear. Watch the skies long enough and objects will sometimes line up by chance. But the human mind, tuned over millennia to recognize signals in noise, resists this reassurance. To the eyes of the public, and even to many observers, the sky right now does not look like randomness. It looks like alignment, as though some unseen hand has gathered the wanderers into the same corridor and released them in sequence. History gives reason to pause when patterns appear. The great extinctions in Earth's record were never the result of one solitary blow, but of convergences, volcanoes erupting during climate shifts, asteroids striking ecosystems already stressed, chains of events that compounded until the system could no longer adapt. The past reminds us that when cycles line up, consequences multiply. What we're witnessing above us may be coincidence, but if it is not, then we are standing at the threshold of something we do not yet understand. And there is the unease. Each piece of the puzzle is defensible on its own. Asteroids pass by every year. Comets occasionally cluster. The sun's activity rises and falls on an 11-year rhythm. An interstellar visitor is rare but not unprecedented. Taken together, though, they form a picture that feels heavier than chance, as though we are watching a cosmic pattern assemble itself in plain sight. From the ground, the effect is visceral. Amateur astronomers report nights where multiple comet tails stretch across the same field of view, luminous scars against the dark. Observatories track one close pass while preparing for the next, never quite able to stand down. Space weather monitors register one geomagnetic storm only to warn of another. The reports accumulate until they blur into a single narrative. The solar system is noisier than it has been in living memory, and Earth is at the centre of the commotion. Even among professionals, the language slips from neutrality. Unusual, unexpected, remarkable clustering. Words that hedge against alarm while admitting that this is not business as usual. They know the statistics say coincidences happen. They also know that in science, coincidences are often the first sign that we have missed something. When multiple anomalies arrive together, they point toward forces operating at scales not yet understood. 3i Atlas moves silently through all of this, indifferent to human speculation. It carries with it the chemistry of another star system, the record of a journey that may have lasted millions of years. To the astronomers tracking its path, it is both an opportunity and a challenge. The rare chance to study alien material and the unsettling coincidence of its timing. Why here? Why now? In the same season as the most crowded skies we have ever recorded? No one can yet answer that. The official reports lean toward caution, reminding readers that coincidence should not be confused with intent. The cautious position is always to assume nature is indifferent, that the patterns we see are products of our own searching minds. Yet even the cautious know this. When cycles converge, history pays attention. When the sky grows restless, Earth remembers. Most years pass without spectacle. Ask any astronomer who spends their nights under the stars and they'll tell you the same. The sky's patient, stingy with drama. A comet or two might brighten enough to catch the public's eye, but the rest arrive as little more than blurred smudges on long exposures. Asteroids slip past unnoticed, their presence reduced to tables of orbital elements, digits on a page. The solar system usually moves with a kind of quiet rhythm, unremarkable except to the specialists who measure every flicker. But 2025 has broken that rhythm. Instead of dots scattered like rain, the year has arranged itself into clusters. 7 comets, 7, are appearing within the same narrow window of months. Each was discovered separately, years apart, by different surveys working with different instruments. Yet here they are, aligned in time as though responding to some hidden invitation. Alongside them, a string of asteroids big enough to worry planetary defense analysts have swept close to Earth's orbit, some within the distance of the Moon, some closer still. One mountain-sized rock cut across the Earth-Moon corridor so tightly that recalculations had to be performed multiple times to rule out impact. Others appeared almost without warning, small but fast, flashing past with only hours of notice. Astronomers have a phrase for this: the swarm effect. Instead of one arrival every few years, they bunch together, compressed into weeks. When plotted on a chart, it looks almost deliberate. Instead of random points spread across decades, the comets cluster like marbles dropped in a heap. The orbits are independent, the origins different, yet to observers on the ground it appears like choreography. Photographs have captured the strangeness. Multiple tails crossing the same wide-field images, faint streaks of dust and ion glowing side by side. Time-lapse videos show them rising and setting together, a ballet of icy wanderers against the constellations. Even the professionals trained to resist pattern-seeking admit that it feels uncanny. Coincidence is the rational explanation, yet coincidence this dense resists acceptance. Adding to the spectacle, the Sun has chosen this exact season to reach its maximum. Its magnetic field twists and snarls, releasing flares that travel outward in storms of radiation. These storms rip at the comets, slicing tails into ribbons, sometimes severing them entirely before new ones grow in their place. Auroras bloom far beyond their usual latitudes, colouring skies where no one alive has seen them before. Amateur observers capture comets against curtains of green and red, the kind of images that would look contrived if they weren't real. It is not that these phenomena are unprecedented. Comets do appear, asteroids do pass by, the Sun does flare, but rarely do they align so tightly, stacking one upon another, demanding attention as a single sequence. Science reminds us that random distributions create clusters. Flip a coin long enough, and improbable streaks are inevitable. Yet human instinct whispers otherwise. Patterns this concentrated suggest forces at work, and it is the instinct that lingers. Even among the cautious, the language has begun to shift. Official bulletins use phrases like remarkable concentration, statistically unusual, unexpected clustering. Words that admit the anomaly without abandoning neutrality. The unease comes not from any one object, but from the way they arrive together, a parade without precedent. For planetary defense analysts, this is more than spectacle. Each asteroid pass demands calculations, refined estimates of size, mass, velocity, and distance. The smaller ones, though less catastrophic, could still destroy a city if they struck. The larger ones are measured in megatons, their kinetic energy exceeding humanity's entire nuclear arsenal. These are not just curiosities, they're reminders that the line between a close call and disaster is measured in fractions of astronomical units. The comets add their own weight to the moment. They are not bound to the same orbits as asteroids. They come from the edges of the solar system, from reservoirs we barely understand. Their behaviour is unpredictable. A dust crust might suppress activity, leaving a comet dim and unremarkable. Or a sudden fracture could expose volatile ice, brightening it by orders of magnitude overnight. In extreme cases, comets fragment, splitting into multiple bodies that follow one another like beads on a string. Each new fragment becomes its own hazard, another unpredictable object racing toward the Sun. With 7 bright comets arriving together, the range of possibilities multiplies. Some may fizzle, others may break apart dramatically. Each carries its own risks, its own capacity to surprise. The very fact that so many are present at once amplifies the chance of the unusual. In statistics, this is called compounding probability. To the public, it looks like alignment. To the imagination, it looks like omen. And then there is Three-Eye Atlas, the interstellar traveller threading through the crowd. It is not one of the swarm, not part of the long-period families that haunt the Oort cloud, but an outsider altogether. Its orbit is hyperbolic, which means it will not return. It is here once, and once only. It carries with it the record of a different system, the chemistry of another sun. To scientists it is treasure, a chance to study alien material firsthand. To everyone else, its timing is simply unnerving. Why this year? Why this season? Why during the busiest sky anyone can remember? No one can answer that. Official explanations retreat into caution. It is coincidence, they remind us, nothing more. But even the cautious know that coincidences in science are often the first hints of forces not yet recognized. When multiple anomalies appear together, they demand investigation. They whisper that we may have overlooked something fundamental. History, too, gives us reason to take clustering seriously. Earth's great collapses have rarely come from a single blow. They arrive as cascades. A volcanic province erupts during a climate swing. An asteroid impacts an ecosystem already stressed by shifting oceans. Disasters pile together until survival becomes impossible. The fossil record shows it again and again. Extinctions are not singular events, but convergences. What we see above us now is not extinction, not yet, but it is convergence. A sky louder than usual, crowded with wanderers, amplified by a restless star. To live beneath such a sky is to feel a truth older than science, that when patterns appear, they matter. When visitors arrive together, they carry weight. The coincidence may be meaningless. It may be nothing more than a statistical cluster in a universe indifferent to human perception, but it does not feel meaningless. And sometimes, the way things feel is the first sign that they are more than they seem. When objects arrive alone, they are manageable. One asteroid brushes past and calculations confirm its safety. One comet brightens, and telescopes track its arc until it fades again. These are singular events, isolated incidents that can be catalogued and filed away. But when they arrive together, overlapping in time, the sense of isolation disappears. Each one amplifies the next, building into something larger than its parts. The swarm has that quality. 7 comets, multiple asteroids, a restless sun, and in the midst of it all an interstellar traveller. It feels less like randomness and more like a system entering a phase of resonance. Resonance is a familiar idea in physics, small pushes that, when timed together, can move massive objects. A swing nudged at the right moment arcs higher. A bridge vibrated in rhythm can tear itself apart. The cosmos too has its resonances. Forces that alone would be harmless can, when aligned, shake the structure of worlds. Consider a close pass by an asteroid. Alone, it is only a curiosity, a line on a chart, a press release noting that no risk exists. But imagine that same pass during a period of heightened solar activity. Space weather disrupts satellites, communications fail, and suddenly the harmless flyby becomes part of a wider crisis. Multiply the scenario by several overlapping events, and the coincidence becomes a cascade. It is not the single asteroid, not the single flare, not the single comet, but their intersection that creates the storm. Earth's history is filled with such intersections. The great volcanic outpourings of the Deccan Traps might not have ended the age of dinosaurs by themselves, but erupting at the same time as an asteroid strike during a period of environmental stress, the overlap turned survival into collapse. The Siberian traps, too, coincided with other global disruptions, tipping ecosystems already strained. Even smaller events, like the Tunguska airburst of 1908, remind us how narrow the margins can be. Had it struck hours later, a city might have vanished. That is what clustering does. It narrows margins. Instead of one crisis at a time, each with a room for recovery, they arrive together. The result is not addition, but multiplication. Systems fail not because any one stress is fatal, but because the stresses combine. The present moment shows the same uneasy arithmetic. Comets crowd the skies, each capable of surprises, fragmentation, brightening, unpredictable jets of dust and ice. Asteroids thread the Earth-Moon system, their kinetic energy measured in megatons. The sun lashes all of it with storms, making faint tails spectacular and rendering spaceflight risky. And through it all drifts 3-Eye Atlas, a reminder that not every visitor is native, that the sky can deliver bodies from beyond our neighbourhood without warning. To scientists, the temptation is to separate these events, to assign each its own category. This one is a long-period comet, that one an Apollo-class asteroid, the other a hyperbolic traveller. Individually, the explanations hold, but together they create something greater, a pattern that feels orchestrated even when we know it is not. Humans have always sought meaning in the sky. Ancient records speak of broom stars, comets sweeping away dynasties, clearing the stage for new orders. The chronicles may exaggerate, but they reveal a truth about perception. Clustering in the heavens has always been interpreted as omen. When multiple apparitions gather at once, people have read it as warning. Today, we use statistics instead of prophecy, but the unease is the same. When the sky grows crowded, we look up and feel that something has changed. There is also the practical concern. Planetary defence is still a young science. Surveys have expanded dramatically, but blind spots remain. Regions near the glare of the sun where objects can hide, approaches from high inclinations where coverage is thin. For every asteroid catalogued as dozens remain unseen. A clustering of known objects is a reminder of the unknowns that could accompany them. It is one thing to track a predicted pass with confidence. It is another to realise how many passes go unpredicted until days before they occur. The swarm of 2025 demonstrates both progress and vulnerability. We can see more than ever before, but what we see unsettles us. The very act of watching reveals how crowded the neighbourhood can be, how narrow the margins of safety truly are. When the graphs fill with dots, when the bulletins arrive in rapid sequence, it becomes harder to maintain the illusion of calm. Some analysts argue that this is only discovery bias, that our instruments have improved and therefore we perceive a pattern where none exists. But even if that is true, perception matters. Systems strained by perception behave differently. Governments invest when citizens feel threatened. Markets shift when headlines repeat the word close pass. Even if the cluster is coincidence, the reaction to it can become its own cascade, a psychological echo of the physical clustering in the sky. This too has precedent. Bright comets have coincided with wars, plagues and upheavals not because they caused them, but because they became symbols onto which fear was projected. When the sky looked unsettled, societies interpreted their own instability through it. The omen did not need to be causal to be effective. The pattern itself was enough to change behaviour. In the present case, the sky is more than symbol. The asteroids are real, the comets measurable, the sun storms disruptive. The overlap makes the symbolism harder to dismiss. It is as though the universe has conspired to remind us of fragility, not by inventing new threats, but by allowing many to arrive together. The cascade is not yet catastrophe, but it demonstrates the principle. When forces align, when margins vanish, systems can topple. Whether biological, social or planetary, the lesson is the same. Resilience is tested not by single blows, but by sequences. And so the question lingers. Is the clustering of 2025 only coincidence, or is it the opening note of a larger cycle? If history is any guide, the difference may be less important than it seems. Patterns of convergence have always mattered. They signal that systems are entering stress, that conditions for collapse are assembling. Whether the mechanism is random or fated, the outcome is the same. For now, the comets continue their arcs, the asteroids slip past, the sun rages, and 3I Atlas drifts on its hyperbolic course. Each is explicable. Together, they are a chorus. And when the sky sings in chorus, Earth would do well to listen. Every orbit carries a story. Each asteroid, each comet follows a path written long before human eyes ever found it. Gravity pulls, planets nudge, time stretches the curve into the shapes astronomers measure. When plotted, these paths form an archive of the solar system's history, billions of bodies falling, circling, scattering. Most years, the archive adds its pages quietly. But when too many stories converge at once, the archive itself looks suspicious, as though its entries had been staged. That is the feeling of 2025. The statistics do not sit comfortably. A handful of close asteroid passes would be ordinary. A single comet bright enough for binoculars would be welcomed as a rare spectacle. Even an interstellar object could be filed away as improbable, yet possible, given a universe filled with wandering debris. But when all three arrive together, multiplied many times over, the numbers begin to resist belief. Astronomers know this, and they say it openly. Coincidence can explain almost anything, but probability sets limits. To see 7 comets crowd into the same season is already an outlier. To see them accompanied by unusual asteroid traffic and overlain by a hyperactive sun stretches coincidence thin. Add the passage of 3I Atlas, and the line between improbable and impossible blurs. This is not the same as declaring intent. Physics insists that each orbit has its explanation. A distant perturbation millions of years ago, a resonance with a planet, a long fall from the Oort cloud. Nothing requires that these explanations connect, yet the timing of their intersection is what disturbs. For orbits set in motion across such vast timescales to overlap now, in the brief window of human observation, feels less like accident and more like alignment. To put it into perspective, consider coin flips again. Flip a coin 10 times, and by chance, you may see a string of 5 heads in a row. Unlikely, but not extraordinary. Now imagine seeing that string repeated in 3 different coin flips performed independently by 3 different people at the same moment. Each result might be explainable in isolation, but together they create suspicion. Something more than chance seems to be at work. This suspicion has driven some astronomers to revisit older ideas. For decades, theories have circulated that extinction events on Earth follow a rough cycle. Every 26 to 30 million years, clusters of disasters coincide, reshaping life on the planet. The mechanism is debated. Perhaps oscillations of the solar system through the galactic plane, perhaps unseen companions tugging at comets from the outer reservoirs. None of these ideas have been proven, but the fossil record does show rhythm, pulses of destruction and renewal. The present clustering has no confirmed connection to those cycles, yet the resemblance is difficult to ignore. Multiple comets, multiple asteroids, a hyperactive sun, and a visitor from interstellar space, all converging in the same year. To many it looks like a demonstration of how cycles manifest, not with one catastrophe, but with many aligned. Even if coincidence is the correct explanation, the psychological impact remains. Human beings are wired to see patterns. Our ancestors survived by noticing alignments in the natural world. Clouds before rain, migrations before famine, shadows before predators. To see multiple anomalies together is to feel instinctively that they matter, that they are warnings. That instinct has not left us, even with the reassurance of probability theory. The unease grows sharper when one considers how fragile the margins are. A city-killer asteroid does not need to be kilometers across. A body only a few dozen meters wide striking at high velocity could flatten a metropolis. Tunguska was such an object, and it missed causing global shock only because it fell in remote Siberian forest. Scale that up slightly, and the loss would be measured not in trees but in millions of lives. The swarm of 2025 includes objects of that class. They are not extinction level individually, but their presence in such numbers reminds us that extinction does not always come from one strike. It can come from cascades, from repeated blows that erode resilience until collapse follows. This is the mathematics of impossibility. Individually, each event fits within expectation. Together they pile probability upon probability until the product approaches zero. The rational mind resists declaring patterns meaningful, but the emotional mind, tuned by evolution, already suspects otherwise. And sometimes the emotional mind is correct. Many discoveries in science have begun with anomalies dismissed as coincidence, until the evidence proved them real. Perhaps this is one of those moments. Perhaps the clustering we see is not random, but a glimpse of structure we do not yet understand. If so, then 2025 may be remembered not just as a year of spectacle, but as the year when humanity realized that cycles of destruction still govern our world, indifferent to our readiness. Even now the calculations continue. Each close pass is refined, each comet's brightness monitored, each flare of the sun catalogued. The data accumulate, but the impression remains. This year does not look like the others. It looks like something assembling, something rehearsing, something preparing to reveal the larger pattern of which it is only the opening act. When paleontologists describe extinction events, they rarely speak of single causes. Instead, they talk about cascades. An asteroid impact coincides with massive volcanism. Climate already strained gives way under new stress. Species vanish not all at once but in pulses, each disappearance weakening the ecosystem until the structure collapses entirely. The record of these events is written in layers of rock, bands of iridium, sudden absences of familiar fossils. The message is clear. Earth's history is not one of smooth continuity, but of sharp interruptions. What makes these interruptions unsettling is their rhythm. They do not appear evenly spaced, but neither are they purely random. When charted across hundreds of millions of years, they cluster in rough cycles. Every few tens of millions of years, a new wave of destruction appears. The debates about mechanism have filled volumes. Some argue for the pull of the galaxy itself, as our solar system oscillates above and below the galactic plane, stirring distant comets into motion. Others propose a companion star long since lost, whose orbit once triggered storms of impacts. Still others imagine more complex gravitational harmonies, resonances among planets and debris fields that send waves of bodies inward. The specifics remain uncertain, but the pattern itself is undeniable. Extinction has a cycle, and cycles, by their nature, repeat. The present clustering of 2025 cannot yet be tied to those cycles with certainty. But it looks like a rehearsal of the same principle. Multiple comets arriving together, asteroids brushing close, solar storms adding their fury. A visitor from beyond reminding us that the solar system is not closed, that the outside can intrude at any time. Each of these by itself is survivable. Together they form the shape of crisis. The statistics strengthen the impression. To have so many comets visible in 1 year is already rare. To add unusual asteroid traffic narrows the odds further. To have it coincide with solar maximum and the passage of an interstellar body shrinks the probability to the vanishing point. Each multiplication of improbabilities makes coincidence less convincing. The numbers whisper what the rocks already record. Cycles of convergence are real. For humans, the difficulty is scale. Our lifespans are too short to notice cycles measured in tens of millions of years. To us, disasters look isolated. A storm, an earthquake, a pandemic. Only when the record of the Earth itself is read does the pattern emerge. But if the fossil record shows the long arc, perhaps the clustering of the sky shows the short one. Perhaps we are living through the first alignments of a new cycle. If so, then the meaning is profound. It would mean that we are not merely observers of chance, but participants in a larger rhythm that has erased worlds before and will do so again. It would mean that extinction is not an exception but a feature, a recurring reset in the story of life. It would mean that survival is not guaranteed, that the cycles which destroyed trilobites and dinosaurs may still have chapters left to write. The mind resists this conclusion because it undermines the illusion of permanence. Civilizations are built on the assumption that tomorrow will resemble today. Crops will grow, oceans will remain stable, the seasons will return in order. But cycles remind us that permanence is an illusion. Tomorrow can be radically different, not because of gradual change, but because of sudden collapse. And here is where the present clustering takes on new weight. Even if it does not lead directly to catastrophe, it demonstrates the mechanism. It shows how multiple stresses can align, how coincidence becomes crisis, how probability bends into inevitability. The sky is giving us a preview of how extinction cycles work. Not one blow, but many, arriving together. For those who wish to dismiss this as exaggeration, history offers little comfort. Every extinction cycle began in moments that looked survivable. Small stresses accumulated until they tipped the system. The seas warmed slightly. Volcanoes erupted intermittently. Species vanished at the margins. Then, when the alignment reached its peak, the cascade accelerated beyond control. Within thousands of years, a blink in geological time, ecosystems that had endured for millions were gone. The parallels are difficult to ignore. Today, Earth is already under strain. Climate is unstable. Biodiversity is collapsing. Systems are stretched thin. To add cosmic stresses to this fragile state is to create the conditions in which cycles thrive. Extinction does not require a single catastrophic strike. It requires convergence. Perhaps that is the true significance of 3i Atlas and its crowded companions. Not that they will strike, not that they will destroy us directly, but that their presence together reminds us how cycles begin. They begin with alignment, with improbable clustering, with forces that alone would be manageable but together become fatal. The mathematics tells us the clustering is improbable. The fossil record tells us cycles are real. The present sky tells us they may already be returning. And so we find ourselves in an uneasy place, looking up at a sky more crowded than any in memory, knowing that coincidence may explain it, but also knowing that coincidence has always been the mask cycles wear before they reveal their full face. The statistics describe the improbability. The fossil record confirms the cycles. But neither answers the deeper question: why do these alignments occur? To accept coincidence is to stop the inquiry too soon. Patterns this sharp demand interpretation. And so, as scientists and thinkers have done throughout history, we begin to layer theories, each more expansive than the last. The first possibility is the simplest: natural harbingers. The solar system is not a stable clockwork machine. It is a sea of debris shaped by countless disturbances. Comets dwell in distant reservoirs, the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud, where small forces accumulate over immense spans of time. A subtle tug from Jupiter, a gravitational ripple from Saturn, even the faint tides of the galaxy itself can dislodge them. Once freed, they fall inward, tracing long ellipses that end in the brilliance of perihelion. Their arrivals may look orchestrated only because we are the unlucky recipients of timing. In this view, the swarm is no omen, no message, only the natural rumble of a system too vast to run smoothly forever. And yet, even in this natural framing, the harbingers matter. A cluster of comets does not appear from nowhere. It points to disturbances far beyond sight, forces powerful enough to rattle distant vaults of ice and stone. Every bright tail, every close pass is evidence of hidden motion in the outer dark. If the solar system were a pond, these are ripples spreading across its surface, telling us that something has shifted in its depths. To call them harbingers is not to personify them, but to recognize their role, messengers of a system's instability. An instability whether planetary or cosmic, has always been the opening act of collapse. But there is another way to frame the pattern. Perhaps the swarm is not accidental but observed. The timing of Three-Eye Atlas is too precise to ignore. At the very moment when the sky fills with wanderers, a body from another star enters our system. Its presence might be coincidence, but it might also be reconnaissance. If intelligent observers exist beyond our world, extinction cycles would be their laboratory. Civilizations rise, strain against their environments, and collapse. To track these rhythms across multiple worlds would be to gather the deepest data the galaxy can offer, the conditions of survival, the thresholds of collapse, the chemistry of failure. In this view, we are not simply participants in a cycle. We are specimens under observation, our crises recorded by travellers who have seen it all before. The implications are unnerving. If we are observed, then extinction cycles must be common enough to warrant study. Our tragedies might be only one entry in a galactic archive. And the timing of Three-Eye Atlas, slipping past as comets brighten and asteroids crowd our skies, becomes less like coincidence and more like surveillance, a passing eye measuring how we endure. Consider what that means, that somewhere beyond our perception, there may be a library of worlds catalogued by their endings. Earth's layer may already be written in draft form, awaiting its conclusion. The third theory takes the idea further still. Perhaps cycles are not merely observed but guided. Interveners might exist, civilizations so advanced that they no longer see worlds as permanent, but as gardens to be pruned, reset, reseeded. Extinction becomes part of their stewardship, not a tragedy, but a tool. They might trigger collapses to prevent stagnation, to clear ecological space for something new, to ensure diversity on a scale larger than any one planet. In this framing, convergences like 2025 are not natural accidents, but deliberate interventions, a cosmic strategy of renewal written in catastrophe. This theory is difficult to accept, but it cannot be dismissed out of hand. Our own species has already reshaped the biosphere, driving countless species to extinction while preserving others. We act as gardeners, though clumsy ones, choosing what thrives and what perishes. To imagine that older civilizations might act similarly on a planetary scale is uncomfortable, but not impossible. It reframes extinction not as failure, but as design, a deliberate resetting of the clock. The chilling implication is that humanity may not be the first intelligent species on Earth, only the latest tenants in a garden tended by forces older and greater than ourselves. Even without invoking alien intervention, the idea resonates with something closer to home, our own role as both observers and triggers. For the first time in history, a species can recognize the signs of an extinction cycle even as it accelerates one. Human industry has altered the climate, reduced biodiversity, destabilized systems that seemed eternal. We build telescopes to track comets, while burning forests that anchor our atmosphere. Intelligence becomes the paradox, the tool that allows us to perceive cycles, and the force that accelerates them. Perhaps the true interveners in this cycle are not distant civilizations, but ourselves. Each theory, natural harbingers, observers, interveners, carries weight. Each could be true in part. None offers certainty. What unites them is their implication that the clustering of 2025 is not trivial. Whether it is the rumble of reservoirs, the gaze of watchers, or the touch of gardeners, the pattern signals something larger than coincidence. And within that pattern lies a warning. Extinction, whether natural or designed, does not strike without prelude. The prelude is here. We stand in the middle of it, unable to know which interpretation is correct, yet compelled to consider them all. The comets will brighten, the asteroids will pass, the sun will rage, and Three-Eye Atlas will slip back into the dark. When it is gone, the theories will remain, and so will the cycles. Theories once opened rarely close neatly. Each possibility unfolds into further layers, each explanation hinting at another beyond it. To interpret the swarm of 2025 as mere natural accident may be rational, but it leaves questions unanswered. To see it as observation or intervention raises even deeper mysteries. And beyond those lies a spectrum of scenarios more expansive still, ideas that border on the mythic, yet cannot be ruled out entirely. One of the most haunting is the zoo hypothesis. Imagine that our planet, like countless others, is under watch not for destruction, but for study. In this view, convergences are not accidents at all, but orchestrated spectacles, tests to see how we respond when the stage grows crowded. The comets and asteroids may not be guided directly, but their clustering is permitted, their timing noted. The presence of 3i Atlas becomes almost theatrical, the passing inspector, slipping silently by as Earth's inhabitants look nervously upward. The implication here is not hostility, but indifference. We are not protected from cycles, nor condemned to them, but simply observed, like animals in an enclosure. The cycles themselves may be the conditions of the experiment. A darker version is the dark forest hypothesis. In this framing, extinction cycles are not natural inevitabilities, but survival strategies. Civilizations, aware of their fragility, strike preemptively against others before they can pose a threat. Periodic collapses are not cosmic accidents but deliberate cullings, eliminating rivals before they emerge. What we see in the sky then could be camouflage, convergences that mask deliberate action. The comets and asteroids would be the weapons of a universe where survival requires silence and where visibility invites destruction. If so, then 3i Atlas is not a mere observer, but a scout, ensuring the rhythm of extinction continues to silence those who rise too far. The opposite possibility is benevolent intervention. Perhaps extinction cycles are not executions but mercies. Civilizations that stagnate or overshoot their resources may be nudged into collapse so that life can reset, ecosystems can recover, diversity can flourish again. In this light, extinction is not punishment but renewal, the hard pruning of a tree that allows it to bloom stronger. 3i Atlas, then, could represent not a threat, but a sign of stewardship, a gardener checking on the soil before planting begins anew. For a species accustomed to seeing extinction as tragedy, this view is difficult, but from a larger perspective, it may be necessary. Without renewal, complexity itself may wither. Even more speculative is the idea of post-biological intelligence. Civilizations may outgrow bodies and biology, existing instead as networks of machines or distributed consciousnesses. To such beings, extinction cycles would not be disasters but natural filters, mechanisms that prevent stagnation and preserve novelty. They might even depend on them, using collapses as opportunities to seed or collect information. In this framework, the swarm of 2025 is not about Earth at all, but about the wider ecology of intelligence, a reminder that life, once it reaches awareness, is drawn into patterns larger than survival. The most expansive theory of all is cosmic consciousness. Perhaps the cycles are not imposed from outside, but emerge from the universe itself. Just as a body regulates itself through rhythms, heartbeat, breath, sleep, so might the cosmos regulate complexity through extinction and renewal. The clustering of comets and asteroids would not be accidents or attacks, but expressions of a deeper order, pulses of a living universe balancing itself across time. In this vision, 3i Atlas is not a scout or a harbinger, but a neuron in a galactic mind, carrying signals across interstellar space as part of a consciousness vaster than anything we can imagine. Each hypothesis carries its own cascade of implications. If the zoo hypothesis is correct, then our task is to recognize the enclosure, to see that survival may mean performance, adaptation under watchful eyes. If the dark forest holds, then visibility itself is danger, and silence becomes strategy. If benevolent intervention is real, then collapse may be prelude to something greater, though we may not survive to witness it. If post-biological intelligence is guiding the cycles, then our place may be as raw material for an intelligence that transcends us. And if cosmic consciousness is true, then extinction is not an end but a breath, and we are part of the inhale and exhale of the universe itself. What unites these possibilities is their refusal to let us remain comfortable. Each reframes extinction cycles as something more than blind chance. Each forces us to confront the possibility that our survival, our collapse and our renewal are bound into a system larger than we understand, and each leaves us with the same tension. Are we at the mercy of forces indifferent to us, or part of a design whose purpose we cannot yet perceive? For humanity caught in this season of convergences, the theories are not abstract. They are mirrors. They force us to ask whether we are observers, interveners, or specimens, whether our intelligence will allow us to break cycles, or whether it will only hasten them, whether we are alone in the universe, or part of a vast and ancient rhythm of life and death. The comets will fade, the asteroids will pass, the sun will settle back into quiet, and Three-Eye Atlas will depart into interstellar night. But the theories will not fade with them. They will remain reminders that cycles do not need our belief to continue, and that patterns once recognized can never be unseen. The rocks beneath our feet are libraries. Each layer of sediment, each band of mineral, each pocket of fossils is a page written in the slow script of geology. The story they tell is not one of smooth progression, but of sudden interruptions. Life flourishes, diversifies, fills the seas and the forests, and then collapses into silence. Whole lineages vanish between one layer and the next. What remains is not only evidence of death, but of memory. The earth remembering what it has lost, inscribing each cycle of abundance and absence into stone. We know these interruptions as extinctions. The Ordovician seas drained of their trilobites, the Devonian reefs silenced, the Permian deserts where 90% of life perished, the Triassic turnover paving the way for dinosaurs, the Cretaceous ending where a single impact finished what volcanoes had already begun. Each of these events is written not in narrative but in absence, the fossils that should be there but are not. Every extinction becomes a kind of punctuation, a pause in the text of life, a break that forces the story to restart in a new direction. To read this record is to realize that extinction itself is a form of memory. Species vanish, but the evidence of their vanishing remains. A band of iridium scattered by an impact, a horizon of ash from a flood basalt eruption, a sudden change in carbon isotopes, telling of seas that turned acidic, of climates that swung violently. Each is a bookmark, a record of the moment when continuity fractured. Life forgets. It cannot carry trilobites into the age of mammals. But Earth remembers. If extinction is memory, then cycles are archives. Each great dying is not only an ending, but an entry, a new layer that will be read by whoever comes after. We are used to thinking of memory as deliberate, carved inscriptions, written books, digital files. But the universe remembers differently. It remembers through patterns repeated, through structures laid down, through scars that endure long after the wound has closed. The Earth itself is such a memory keeper, and every extinction is another entry in its library. This perspective reframes our current unease. The crowded sky, the comets, the asteroids, the interstellar visitor, all may be more than transient spectacle. They may be the beginning of another entry, another punctuation mark in the long script. To us, such a possibility is terrifying. To the planet, it is continuity. For billions of years, Earth has written its story in the rhythm of loss and renewal. What seems like collapse to its inhabitants is simply another page added to the book. But perhaps Earth is not the only memory keeper. If civilizations older than ours exist, they may have learned to record extinctions not only in geology, but in archives of their own making. Imagine a galactic library where the deaths of worlds are catalogued, data on climate collapse, records of atmospheric change, sequences of DNA preserved before they vanished. To such a library, Earth's extinctions would be only one entry among thousands, each world a case study in the fragility of life. 3i Atlas, drifting silently through our system, might even be part of such a library, carrying with it records gathered across countless encounters, fragments of knowledge exchanged invisibly as it passes. The possibility of such cosmic memory forces us to confront our own impermanence. We think of human records as permanent: books, monuments, digital archives, but even the best of them will not survive geological time. The fossils will outlast us. The isotopes will persist when our words are dust. Our memory may be detailed, but it is fragile. The planet's memory is blunt but enduring. In the long view, the Earth forgets us more slowly than we can remember ourselves, and if other intelligences exist, they may preserve memory in ways that make ours look fleeting. A probe passing between stars might carry the genetic archive of extinct species. A distributed consciousness spanning systems might remember the collapse of civilizations long gone. In such a context, extinction is not the end of memory, but the moment of its preservation, the point at which data is collected and filed. We may resist extinction, but the universe may treat it as a necessary process of recording, a way of ensuring that no story is entirely lost. Even without invoking other intelligences, there is the unsettling idea that extinction is itself a form of cosmic archaeology. When species vanish, when ecosystems collapse, what is left behind is not only loss but evidence. Whoever digs, be it future humans, successor species, or alien explorers, will find the traces. They will know that life once reached a peak and then fell. They will reconstruct the cycle just as we reconstruct those that came before. Extinction, then, is not erasure but inscription. This reframing does not make extinction easier to accept, but it does expand its meaning. If cycles are archives, then we live not at the end of the story, but in the act of writing. Our choices, our collapses, our recoveries will be part of what the Earth remembers. The silence we fear may one day be read as signal, as evidence that intelligence arose, strained, and perhaps failed. To imagine that record is humbling, for it forces us to see ourselves not as authors of permanence, but as entries in a vast and ongoing text. And perhaps that is what the crowded sky is whispering to us now, that every convergence, every improbable cluster, is not random noise but part of the script. That when 3i Atlas departs, it will carry with it not only the chemistry of another star, but also a glimpse of what Earth is becoming, a planet on the cusp of writing another chapter in its archive of endings. When archaeologists dig into forgotten cities, they find not only objects but absences. A broken wall where none should be, an unfinished tool abandoned mid-work, a layer of ash burying streets that were once busy. From these silences they reconstruct endings. Extinctions operate the same way. What survives is not the living creature, but the imprint of its vanishing. A trilobite pressed into stone, a fern's shadow sealed in shale, a gap in the fossil record where continuity should exist. Each silence is a record, each absence a clue. If this is true for Earth, why not for the cosmos? Perhaps what we see as extinction cycles are part of a larger archaeology, a galactic-scale excavation of life's rise and fall. 3i Atlas drifting past us might be nothing more than frozen debris, but it could also be a shard of that archaeology, a fragment of memory cast across interstellar distances, carrying traces of a world long erased. To hold such an object in a laboratory is to cradle not just alien chemistry, but alien history. Even its silence tells us something, that other systems too produce wanderers, that we are not alone in leaving debris as testimony. It is not impossible to imagine civilizations older than ours cultivating archives of endings. They might scatter probes like seeds, each designed to witness and record the collapse of a world. Some might simply gather data, others might preserve fragments of DNA, culture, or language, keeping alive what a planet could not. These would be monuments not built of stone, but of memory, vaults of extinction, spread across the stars. If so, then perhaps Earth's own cycle is already catalogued, its beginning stages noted by watchers who know the pattern better than we do. Humanity has already begun creating its own monuments of silence. We launch spacecraft beyond the planets, their golden records etched with greetings and music. We carve digital archives into metal, hoping they will outlast us. We bury waste deep in rock, knowing it may persist longer than any language. These are our attempts to be remembered, to survive extinction by leaving traces behind. And yet, compared to the durability of geology, our monuments are fragile. Files corrupt, materials decay, languages die. In the long run, the fossils will speak more clearly than our words. Still, the impulse to preserve is revealing. It suggests we already know, at some level, that extinction is inevitable. Every library, every time capsule, every attempt at legacy is a hedge against disappearance. We sense that we will not endure, so we scatter fragments of ourselves in the hope that someone, somewhere, someday, will reconstruct us. In this way, even before extinction arrives, we participate in the archaeology of silence. We are already leaving behind the evidence of our absence. What future archaeologists might find is unsettling to imagine. They might uncover the layers of our cities, the carbon spike of our industry, the sudden thinning of biodiversity recorded in fossils. They might find satellites drifting dead in orbit, monuments circling long after the ground below is forgotten. They might find 3I Atlas itself, carrying traces of Earth, dust from its passage, molecules of our atmosphere trapped in its surface. To them, our collapse would not be mystery but data, one more entry in the record of endings. The concept of cosmic archaeology reframes extinction again. It is not only an erasure, but a preservation. The silence that follows collapse is not empty. It is full of evidence. Every failed civilization leaves behind ruins. Every vanished species leaves behind fossils. Every burned forest leaves behind charcoal seams in rock. Extinction is not disappearance, but transformation of presence into trace. From this perspective, cycles are less like deaths and more like stratigraphy. New layers placed upon old, memory thickening over time. Perhaps that is why convergences unsettle us. They remind us not only that collapse may be near, but that collapse is itself a way of being remembered. To face extinction is to face inscription. Our cities may crumble, our words may vanish, but the record of our vanishing will persist, legible to whoever comes after. 3I Atlas, gliding past as the comets flare and the asteroids sweep by, is like a page turned in that record, a marker of transition, a sign that we are entering a chapter that others may one day read. If so, then we must ask, what story are we leaving behind? Will the archaeologists of the future see a species that recognized its cycles and tried to resist them, or one that accelerated its own collapse? Will they find evidence of resilience, of attempts to endure, or will they find only the sudden spike and fall of a civilization that could not manage its power? The fossils will not lie. They will show the extinctions we triggered, the atmosphere we altered, the oceans we destabilized. They will also show whether we endured, whether after the collapse we returned, or whether our silence was final. This is the most sobering implication of cosmic archaeology, that extinction is not only about loss, but about judgment. Every trace we leave will be interpreted, every ruin will be read, every silence will be reconstructed. In this way, extinction is not private, it is public, inscribed into the memory of the Earth and perhaps the universe itself. We cannot control whether cycles arrive, but we can influence how our entry is written. The swarm of 2025, the restless sky, the passage of 3I Atlas. These may be the preface to our chapter. How the chapter ends is not yet determined, but the record will endure regardless. The unsettling comfort is this: extinction cycles do not erase completely. They transform life into memory. They turn presence into trace. They guarantee that nothing is ever truly forgotten, only transcribed into a new form. For those who come after, whether human descendants, successor species, or alien explorers, our silence will not be empty. It will be legible. And in that legibility, we will endure in a way that permanence never could. From a geological perspective, humanity arrived only moments ago. The last great extinction ended 66 million years in the past, and in the blink of time that followed, mammals spread, forests grew back, oceans stabilized, and the world entered its current chapter. Our own species has walked upright for barely a few 100,000 years, and only for a fraction of that have we built civilizations. We are newcomers to a planet that has endured endless cycles of abundance and loss. Yet for all our short history, we are the first to look back and recognize the pattern. We dig into rock and see extinction written in layers. We measure isotopes and reconstruct climates that killed worlds long before we existed. We trace the vanished and know they are not anomalies, but entries in a recurring rhythm. To know this is both gift and burden. We are the first species aware that the stage beneath our feet is not permanent. The irony is that we recognize the cycles just as we may be entering one. The crowded skies of 2025 feel like a reminder that extinction does not arrive politely, one stress at a time. It arrives in convergences, in alignments of forces that overwhelm resilience. And when we look at our own time, we see convergences everywhere. The climate is warming faster than ecosystems can adapt. Species vanish daily, not in mass graves, but in a steady thinning that leaves the biosphere brittle. Forests shrink, oceans acidify, ice retreats. Systems that once buffered life are weakening all at once. Even without comets, even without asteroids, we are already fragile. The swarm above us only sharpens the awareness. What a volcanic eruption was to the Permian, what an impact was to the Cretaceous, our own industry may be to the present. The initiating stress, the destabilizing push that ensures smaller blows will cascade into collapse. The danger is not that we face one crisis, but that we face many at the same time, and in that sense we are already living the opening chapter of a cycle we thought we could escape. For individuals, this awareness is difficult to carry. Life insists on continuity. Families are raised, futures planned, dreams pursued, all on the assumption that tomorrow will resemble today. To hold in mind that tomorrow could fracture, that the systems sustaining us are vulnerable to collapse, is almost unbearable. And yet in quiet moments, it is impossible to ignore. Storms grow more violent, summers hotter, headlines filled with fires and floods. The language of stability grows thinner. We sense the fragility even if we do not speak of it. For societies, the paradox is sharper still. We build technologies to defend against asteroids, monitoring the sky with unprecedented precision, while at the same time destabilizing the biosphere beneath us. We can see 3I Atlas as it drifts in from another star, but we cannot stop ourselves from eroding the systems that keep our atmosphere breathable. Intelligence gives us telescopes and algorithms, but it also gives us the power to accelerate collapse. We are the first species to measure extinction cycles, and the first to contribute knowingly to one. It is tempting to imagine that intelligence will save us, that awareness will allow us to break the rhythm, to step outside the cycles written in stone, but intelligence cuts both ways. It sharpens fear as much as foresight. It creates weapons of extinction as readily as it creates defences. Nuclear arsenals still wait in their silos, silent until the moment they are not. Artificial intelligence grows faster than our understanding of its consequences. Our tools expand possibility, but they also expand risk. In this way, we embody the paradox. We are both the observer and the trigger, the scientist cataloguing the cycle, and the agent accelerating its return. And so we stand at the edge, aware in a way no species before us has been. The trilobites did not know the Ordovician seas were failing. The dinosaurs did not watch the sky for falling fire. Forests collapsing at the Permian boundary did not understand they were caught in a planetary transformation. Only we can name the cycle as it begins. Only we can look up at the swarm of comets and asteroids and see the resemblance to what came before. This awareness is both privilege and torment. The question that follows is whether awareness makes a difference. If extinction cycles are written into the structure of the Earth and the galaxy, then perhaps knowledge changes nothing. We may be like a sailor who knows the shape of the storm but cannot steer clear of it. Yet awareness also offers possibility. To recognize fragility is to imagine resilience. To see the pattern is to wonder whether it can be broken. This is where human perspective matters most. For individuals, the recognition of cycles may deepen humility, reminding us that we are temporary tenants on a planet older and stronger than we can fathom. For societies, the recognition may spur urgency, pushing us to act not as if time is infinite, but as if it is precious. For the species as a whole, awareness may be the one tool that cycles did not anticipate, the possibility that intelligence itself can alter the rhythm. Whether that possibility is real remains uncertain. We may already be too entangled in the cycle to escape, but the attempt itself matters. To resist collapse, to build resilience, to preserve memory. These are the acts by which species endure, even if they do not survive unchanged. In this way, intelligence offers not immunity but participation, a way of shaping how the cycle unfolds, even if it cannot be avoided entirely. Perhaps that is the true meaning of Three-Eye Atlas passing overhead during the season of convergences. Not that it brings doom, but that it forces us to look up and recognize the rhythm. It is a reminder that extinction is not distant history but present possibility, that cycles continue whether we accept them or not. And in recognizing them, we confront the choice of how to live within them, in denial or in preparation, in despair or in defiance. Standing at the edge, we do not know what the cycle will bring, or how far it will carry us. But we do know this: to live in awareness of it is to live differently. It is to carry both fear and wonder, both fragility and resilience, both silence and song. It is to be human in the most profound sense, a creature who can see the storm gathering and still choose how to face it. When societies confront patterns that feel larger than themselves, they respond first with stories. Myths are the oldest form of risk assessment. When ancient cultures saw comets, they imagined them as brooms sweeping away kingdoms or swords drawn across the heavens. When alignments filled the night sky, they read them as warnings of war, famine, or change. These stories were not scientifically accurate, but they captured something true: that sudden patterns in the sky are not ordinary and that their timing matters. Today we tell different stories. Instead of myths, we lean on statistics. We calculate probabilities of impact, percentages of survival, odds of coincidence. The language has changed, but the impulse is the same. We see the swarm in the heavens and ask the same question our ancestors asked. What does this mean for us? For individuals, the answer is often fear. It is difficult to live under a sky that feels restless. Even if no impact occurs, even if every asteroid passes safely, the awareness itself gnaws at the imagination. The headlines accumulate. Another near miss, another comet brightening, another solar storm interfering with satellites. And the cumulative effect is a sense of fragility. People begin to sense that their world is not as stable as it seemed. For governments, the answer is unease. Resources must be devoted to monitoring, to planetary defense initiatives, to preparing for unlikely but devastating impacts. Budgets must account for both the visible crises, storms, fires, floods, and the invisible ones rushing silently through space. The swarm above us demonstrates how difficult this balance is. Each new detection proves the importance of vigilance, while also proving how vulnerable we remain. For scientists, the answer is paradox. On one hand, discovery is exhilarating. Each new comet, each close pass, each interstellar visitor is a chance to study, to learn, to expand understanding. On the other hand, the convergence itself resists explanation. Probability should scatter such events, not cluster them. To see them arrive together forces scientists to wrestle with patterns that statistics alone cannot soothe. The data accumulate, but the unease remains, and for humanity as a whole, the swarm becomes a mirror. It reflects not only the fragility of our planet, but the contradictions of our species. We are capable of extraordinary foresight, building telescopes that can track a rock millions of kilometers away, and yet we struggle with the simplest foresight of all, recognizing that we are destabilizing the biosphere that sustains us. We celebrate each safe passage of an asteroid, but we continue to erode our forests, our oceans, our climate, as if those systems were indestructible. The comets remind us of our vulnerability from above, even as we demonstrate our vulnerability from within. This mirror can be uncomfortable, but it is also revealing. It shows us that intelligence is not immunity. Awareness does not guarantee survival. Knowing that cycles exist does not ensure that we will escape them. Instead, it forces us to confront the possibility that intelligence is only one more experiment in the long history of life. A remarkable adaptation, but not necessarily a permanent one. Yet awareness also carries potential. Unlike trilobites or dinosaurs, we can imagine futures. We can simulate outcomes, design defenses, prepare contingencies. We can see a rock-on collision course decades in advance and build missions to deflect it. This ability does not make us immune to cycles, but it does give us a chance to shape how they unfold. That chance is fragile, limited and untested, but it is real. This is why the swarm of 2025 matters. It is not just a cluster of comets and asteroids. It is a rehearsal of fragility, a demonstration of how cycles begin. It forces us to confront the reality that survival depends not only on monitoring the sky, but on stabilizing the ground beneath us. Extinction cycles are not purely cosmic. They are ecological, climatic, and social as well. The comets may pass harmlessly, but if they remind us of our vulnerability, they will have performed a service greater than any catastrophe could. The human perspective then is layered. On one level, we feel fear. The fear of collapse, of cycles repeating, of endings we cannot prevent. On another level, we feel wonder, that we can witness these patterns, recognize them, and place ourselves within them. And on a deeper level still, we feel responsibility to decide what kind of record we will leave, what kind of memory the next cycle will preserve. Perhaps this is the meaning of standing at the edge. It is not to know the outcome, but to recognize the stakes. It is to live in the tension between fragility and possibility, between collapse and resilience. It is to understand that extinction cycles may not be escapable, but that how we face them, with blindness or with awareness, is within our control. 3i Atlas, drifting silently among the swarm, does not answer these questions. It does not comfort or condemn. It simply passes, indifferent to our interpretations, but its timing ensures that we ask the questions at all. And perhaps that is its role, not as harbinger or observer, but as mirror, forcing us to see ourselves against the backdrop of cycles we cannot escape. To live at such a moment is to live with contradiction. We are both the first species to recognize extinction cycles, and the first to hasten one. We are both the most fragile of creatures, and the only ones capable of imagining futures beyond fragility. We are both participants in the cycle and potential breakers of it. Whether we can fulfill that potential remains uncertain. But the recognition itself is profound. Standing at the edge, we see the storm gathering. Whether it passes or breaks upon us, we cannot yet know, but to see it is already to be changed. To know the cycle is to carry its weight, to live with the awareness that permanence is illusion and that resilience is choice. The swarm has made us look upward, but in truth, It forces us to look inward. What we find there will determine not only how this cycle unfolds, but how it will be remembered. The most disquieting truth about cycles is that they rarely announce their endings in ways we expect. They begin as murmurs, anomalies, convergences, scattered signs that seem trivial when isolated but take on weight when combined. The swarm of 2025 is such a murmur. It does not need to bring fire or flood to be meaningful. Its meaning lies in reminding us that endings are not sudden. They are built from alignments, from patterns that accumulate until the world shifts beneath them. To recognize this is to confront the possibility that cycles are not blind machinery. They behave as if they notice us, as if they reflect our own condition back at us. A paleontologist looking into rock strata is not simply studying fossils, but reading a mirror of inevitability. The Permian extinction shows not only volcanic fury, but the limits of resilience. The Cretaceous impact reveals not only an asteroid, but the fragility of ecosystems that were already strained. Every extinction cycle doubles as commentary. This is how life collapses. This is how it endures. This is what is forgotten, and this is what is remembered. Perhaps this is why the swarm feels alive to us. The comets brightening together, the asteroids slipping past, the sun raging at its maximum, and Three-Eye Atlas threading silently through. It all has the texture of attention, as though the cycle itself were watching. Rationally, we know these are indifferent forces, following trajectories set millions of years ago. But emotionally, the convergence reads like scrutiny. Something vast has turned its gaze our way, not to condemn or to protect, but simply to take note. If extinction cycles watch, they do so through inscription. Each collapse becomes part of the geological record, written not in words but in chemistry and absence. The cycle that erases is also the cycle that remembers. Trilobites are gone, but their fossils remain. Dinosaurs are lost, but the iridium layer persists. In the same way, whatever follows us will find the traces of our presence. A carbon spike in the ice, plastic hardened into rock, satellites circling long after cities below have fallen silent. This cycle records everything. It may not preserve us whole, but it will preserve the fact that we were here. This idea unsettles because it strips survival of its exclusivity. We tend to think that endurance means continuity, that to survive is to remain unchanged. But cycles suggest a different form of endurance. To be remembered is also to endure, even if transformed into fossil, ruin, or trace. In this sense, extinction is not pure erasure. It is a handoff between presence and inscription. The cycle that watches back promises not that we will live forever, but that our absence will never be empty. Human cultures have always intuited this. Myths of floods and fires are not only warnings but records. They encode memory of earlier collapses, translated into stories of gods and judgments. Ancient farmers who spoke of comets as brooms, sweeping away kingdoms, may not have known about galactic tides or orbital resonances, but they knew what mattered, that sudden patterns in the sky were connected to change on Earth. Their stories were survival mechanisms, memory carried in narrative form. They turned cycles into cautionary tales. We dismiss them as superstition, but they were closer to truth than we often admit. Now, with telescopes and statistics, we frame the stories differently. We speak of probabilities, orbital dynamics, isotopic shifts. We place the swarm into charts and models instead of omens, yet the emotional response is the same. We look up and feel that something is aligning, something larger than ourselves. The difference is not that we are more rational, but that we can prove what our ancestors only sensed. Cycles are real, and they do return. The role of Three-Eye Atlas in this narrative is haunting. It does not need to strike or to alter trajectories to matter. Its significance is its timing. Passing through as the swarm unfolds, it embodies the very principle of convergence, a reminder that the universe is not sealed, that other systems touch ours, that we are woven into patterns beyond our sight. Its presence during this crowded season ensures that we will always remember 2025 not as a year of isolated events, but as a moment of alignment. In that way, Atlas is less a rock than a marker, the punctuation of a chapter we are still writing. The cycle that watches back forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. If extinction is inscription, what inscription will we leave? Will future archaeologists, whether human descendants, successor species, or alien observers, read our layer as one of tragedy, of self-destruction, of fragility unmastered? Or will they read resilience, adaptation, the story of a species that recognized the cycle and chose to resist it? The record will not lie. It will show the forests we destroyed or preserved, the species we let vanish or saved, the atmosphere we stabilized or broke. Our choices are the script, and the cycle is the archivist. There is another dimension to this. If cycles are records, then perhaps they are also conversations. Every extinction writes a message forward. Here is how life failed last time. Here is what the survivors carried through. Each cycle informs the next. In this way, the Earth itself learns, layer by layer, what it means to be resilient. Life today is shaped by the survivors of past extinctions. Mammals inherit a world where dinosaurs fell. Our oceans are structured by species that endured previous die-offs. In every gene, in every adaptation, the lessons of collapse are preserved. The cycle watches, but it also teaches. This possibility reframes the swarm once more. Perhaps it is not only warning, but education. To watch the comets flare, to track the asteroids, to endure the solar storms, is to learn again that fragility is real. To witness convergence without catastrophe is to glimpse how cycles gather. And to imagine extinction is to understand survival differently, not as permanence, but as continuity through change. Memory carried in forms we cannot yet predict. In this sense, the cycle is not enemy, not judge, but mirror and mentor. It shows us what has happened, it hints at what will happen, and it forces us to decide what kind of trace we will leave. To live in such a moment is to stand in dialogue with the universe itself, answering a question asked long before we were here. How will this world endure its next transformation? The answer remains unwritten. The comets will fade, the asteroids will pass, the sun will quiet, and Three-Eye Atlas will vanish into interstellar dark. But the memory of this convergence will remain, both in our awareness and in the record the Earth keeps. Whether that memory becomes a prelude to collapse or a lesson we finally heed depends on us. The cycle is watching, the archive is open, the inscription is already underway. Every extinction leaves behind more than silence. It leaves memory, not in words but in stone, not in stories but in strata. To reflect on the possibility of our own cycle is to look backward as much as forward, to measure ourselves against the record of endings that came before. Consider the Ordovician. More than 400 million years ago, life flourished in the seas, trilobites scuttling across the seabed, coral forests swaying in the currents. Then the climate turned. Glaciers grew, oceans drained, and ecosystems collapsed. Nearly 3/4 of marine species disappeared. The world did not end, but it became something new, written in a different register of life, or the Devonian, the so-called Age of Fishes. For millions of years, oceans were rich with armoured giants, reefs stretching across the globe, green plants beginning to colonise the land. Then came a drawn-out crisis. Pulses of extinction spread over tens of millions of years. Oxygen dropped, seas stagnated, reefs died. Entire classes of creatures vanished, clearing the way for forests to expand and for the ancestors of amphibians to take their first hesitant steps on land. It was not one catastrophe, but many, layered into a long unravelling. The Permian was worse, the Great Dying, 90% of species gone, forests withered, Oceans turn toxic. The causes remain debated. Massive volcanism, runaway warming, anoxia spreading through the seas. Whatever the mechanism, the effect was total. A world emptied, its abundance reduced to shadows. If intelligence had existed then, it would have known despair. And yet, from that despair, life rebuilt itself, reinventing ecosystems, experimenting with forms that would one day give rise to the age of reptiles. The Triassic too ended in upheaval. Volcanic eruptions tore at the crust as Pangaea split apart. Climate wavered, species fell, and dinosaurs inherited the ruins. For the next 150 million years they would dominate, filling every niche from soaring pterosaurs to massive sauropods. Their triumph, too, was temporary. At the Cretaceous boundary, an asteroid completed their undoing. The impact was sudden, violent, unmistakable. Firestorms, tsunamis, skies darkened by dust. The planet lurched from abundance into scarcity, food chains collapsed, and the age of dinosaurs ended. Yet in the silence that followed, mammals thrived. Small, overlooked creatures inherited the Earth, carrying within them the seeds of future intelligence. The very fact that we reflect on the cycle today is owed to that ending. Without the asteroid, there may never have been us. These stories are sobering, but they are also liberating. They remind us that extinction is not erasure. Each collapse has been brutal, but each has also been fertile. The end of one world creates the beginning of another. Extinction is not only destruction, it is transformation. Life writes its history in cycles of loss and renewal. To place ourselves within this lineage is to recognize both fragility and possibility. We are not exempt. The convergence of the present moment, the comets, the asteroids, the restless sun, the interstellar traveller, reminds us that we too live within cycles. Our civilization may be vast compared to trilobites, but to the Earth, we are just another species on a crowded page. We may not be permanent, but neither were they. And just as their absence created space for what followed, so too might ours. But here is the difference. We can reflect. We can see the record, measure the cycles, recognize the patterns. The trilobites did not know the seas were failing. The dinosaurs did not know the sky was falling. We do. That awareness is our singular gift and perhaps our only defense. To reflect on past extinctions is not only to see endings, but to see continuities. Every survivor carried something forward. A fern that endured a drought, a fish that adapted to stagnant seas, a mammal small enough to hide in burrows as fire rained from the sky. Continuity was fragile, but it was real. Life did not preserve everything, but it preserved enough. And that enough became the foundation for what followed. The question we face is what continuity we will carry forward. If we collapse, what fragments of culture, knowledge, or spirit will persist? Will our archives survive long enough to be found? Will our languages be legible to those who come after? Or will our continuity be written only in stone? A spike of carbon, a scattering of bones, the shadow of a city sealed in ash. We cannot know, but we can choose what we try to preserve, what we hope will endure. This choice reframes extinction again. It is not only about survival, but about legacy. Even if cycles are unavoidable, even if collapse is certain, what we leave behind matters. Our actions are not erased by extinction. They are recorded by it. The ruins we build, the species we save or destroy, the atmosphere we alter, all become part of the record. In this way, we write our story whether we intend to or not. The cycle will remember us just as it remembered those before. And so, as the swarm thickens and the gaps in our vision become more obvious, we are left with a sobering realization. What we can see may not be the whole picture. For every object tracked, another may slip sunward, hidden in glare, revealed only when it is too late. For every prediction of probability, there may be an unseen companion waiting to surprise us. The sense of safety that comes with detection is, in truth, only partial. We are mapping shadows, not certainties. Perhaps that is the true nature of living in such a cosmos. Never complete knowledge, only glimpses. The comets and asteroids remind us that the sky has always been larger than our instruments, and the future wider than our calculations. To live beneath such a sky is to accept that uncertainty is part of existence. What follows from that uncertainty, whether it reveals hidden dangers, deeper patterns, or something stranger still, will take us beyond the comfort of what we think we know. The next step in this story lies not only in the statistics of what we have seen, but in the interstellar threads that connect what has visited before with what visits now. The uncertainty that shadows our skies becomes more profound when we realise that some of these visitors are not merely the drifting remnants of our own solar system. They come from elsewhere, from outside, from the gulfs between stars. Only in the last decade has humanity confirmed their existence with clarity, and already their arrival feels less like anomaly than pattern. Oumuamua in 2017, Borisov in 2019. Now 3i Atlas threading through the crowded sky of 2025. To encounter one would be wonder. To encounter three within so narrow a span of years is something else. When Oumuamua was first spotted slipping past at astonishing speed, the astonishment was not just in its strangeness, but in its singularity. It was meant to be once in a century, a statistical ghost that we were lucky, almost impossibly lucky, to see. Then Borisov followed, less enigmatic but no less alien in origin. Now, with 3i Atlas, the sense of isolation collapses. We no longer speak of a lone visitor but of a procession, and that change in framing is everything. For where there is a procession, there may be a road. Where there is sequence, there may be structure. Astronomers, cautious in their wording, remind us that probabilities are not destiny. Detection improves, instruments sharpen, and chance can cluster just as surely as rocks in space. Yet even within the conservatism of science, a quiet unease emerges. Are we witnessing coincidence, or are we living through a crossing, a region of the galaxy where encounters become common? The idea is not new. For decades, models of the Sun's orbit through the Milky Way suggested a rhythmic passage above and below the galactic plane, a slow oscillation measured in tens of millions of years. Some paleontologists have pointed to extinction spikes that seem to follow this same cadence. Dustier regions, denser clouds, comet showers unleashed. Perhaps this is what we're entering now, not a random convergence but the expected turbulence of our galactic path. Consider the metaphor of a ship at sea. In calm waters, only stray driftwood floats by, rare and solitary. But when the vessel sails into currents near the mouths of rivers, debris gathers, the flotsam grows thick, and the captain must keep sharper watch. If the solar system is our ship, then 3i Atlas may not be an isolated piece of wreckage. It may be the herald of a current, a sign that we are steering into thicker waters, waters that have overturned passengers before. If such a crossing explains the alignments of 2025, then the past begins to take on a new cast. The Ordovician die-off, the Devonian collapse, the end of the Permian, these were not merely accidents of climate and chance, but perhaps consequences of passage. Each great extinction could mark a chapter, when Earth's fragile biosphere sailed through another corridor of galactic debris, struck not only by rock, but by radiation, by clouds of particles, by unseen turbulence on scales too vast for early life to comprehend. The rhythm of extinctions becomes the rhythm of the Milky Way itself, etched not in stellar orbits alone, but in the scars left on our planet. What makes 3i Atlas remarkable is its arrival not into silence, but into a chorus already playing. Had it come in isolation, we might file it alongside Oumuamua and Borisov, a curiosity that challenges theory but little more. But arriving in the same window as 7 bright comets, multiple asteroid close passes, and a solar maximum, it no longer feels solitary. It feels orchestrated. Not in the sense of conscious design, though that remains one unsettling possibility, but in the sense of resonance, of patterns overlapping until they amplify one another. And resonance, as we know from physics, is never gentle. It builds, it compounds, it takes a signal and makes it thunder. Perhaps that is what extinction cycles are at their heart, resonances between Earth's fragility and the cosmic rhythms through which we move. 3i Atlas is not the cause but the marker, a single strand that shows the weave of a much larger pattern. Let us pause here and picture it differently. Imagine standing not on Earth but in the dark between stars, watching the solar system itself drift by as if it were only another traveller. Around it, debris fields invisible from Earth's surface press in, clouds of icy bodies stirred by the slow breathing of the galaxy. Now and then, one of these bodies finds its path into the inner system, blazing bright as a comet or arriving quiet as a rock. From that vantage, Oumuamua, Borisov and 3i Atlas are not anomalies but expected scouts, vanguards of the cloud through which the sun sails. From Earth, they seem miraculous. From the galactic perspective, they may be inevitable. This view does not diminish the wonder. If anything, it heightens it. For to see the pattern at all is to recognise that we are part of something vast. These visitors remind us that our planet is not an island drifting alone, but a deck on a vessel caught in currents we only barely chart. We measure their speeds, 61 kilometers per second, 92 kilometers per second, but those are only surface figures. Beneath them is the truer measure, the slow tens of millions of years rhythm of our orbit around the galaxy, a pendulum swinging through light and shadow. And yet, a question remains. Why now? Why at this particular crossing do we find not only debris but interstellar strangeness? A rock that accelerates without explanation, a comet that behaves ordinary yet alien, and now 3i Atlas, silent and ambiguous? If crossings are natural, then the timing still unsettles. For the probability of 3 confirmed interstellar objects in such short succession is tiny, even allowing for better detection. Tiny enough that some whisper about design, about a message in the sequence, about visitors timed to appear not randomly, but when we were finally able to see them. It may be only speculation, but speculation has always been the seed of discovery. To ask what if is to take the first step toward recognising hidden structure, and whether the sequence is natural or intentional, its meaning for us is the same, the recognition that we are part of a larger fabric. That extinctions, visitors and convergences are not isolated events, but threads in a tapestry stretching across space and time. Perhaps the truest meaning of 3i Atlas, then, is not that it threatens or saves, but that it reminds. It reminds us of Oumuamua, of Borisov, of the others surely yet unseen. It reminds us that the galaxy is not empty, and that crossings happen. It reminds us that what feels improbable from the vantage of a single human lifetime may be inevitable when measured against the breathing of the Milky Way. And as we follow that reminder, we are left with a choice of interpretation. We can see this new comet as coincidence, another stone passing silently by, or we can see it as part of a procession, a sign that we're entering a crowded channel in galactic space. One view leaves us with curiosity, the other leaves us with responsibility, to prepare, to observe, to wonder at the currents that have carried countless worlds through cycles before us. If extinction is the punctuation of those crossings, then the visitors are the commas, the marks that signal something larger unfolding. 3i Atlas is one such mark, a strand in the interstellar thread, and whether it speaks of natural rhythm or of something more deliberate, it teaches the same lesson. Our story is inseparable from the galaxy's story. We are not apart from it. We are woven into its fabric. If Oumuamua, Borisov and 3i Atlas form a sequence, the next step in thought is inevitable. Could sequence itself be the message? Rocks are rocks, comets are comets, and coincidence is always possible. Yet when improbable arrivals cluster, human imagination leaps to pattern. Perhaps that leap is not naive. Perhaps it is exactly what these visitors are meant to awaken. Let us consider the possibility, cautiously but seriously, that interstellar visitors may serve as signals, a form of galactic punctuation visible across civilizations. A rock passing through space carries no antenna, no coded transmission, and yet its very arrival can speak. The timing can be the message. The improbability itself can be the sign. We already know how much meaning humans can assign to simple alignments. An eclipse at the moment of a battle, a comet blazing before the fall of kings. What then of alignments on the scale of galaxies? Suppose for a moment that a civilization older than ours wished to mark their presence without shouting across the void. Electromagnetic signals scatter, fade, drown in the noise of stars. Probes may crumble in eons of drift, but comets and interstellar objects are durable, visible and timeless. To nudge such an object into a trajectory intersecting our path requires only patience. To send not one but a sequence is to say, look closer. To send them when our instruments have just matured enough to notice is to whisper, you are ready to see. From this perspective, 3i Atlas is not merely a visitor but a participant in dialogue. Not dialogue in words, but in alignments. It does not matter if the rock itself is natural, unaltered, a piece of frozen debris. The signal is in its presence, not its structure. Just as a bell can be cast of ordinary bronze yet still summon the faithful, so an interstellar object can be of ice and dust, yet still toll a message across time. Skeptics rightly counter, where is the evidence of intention? Without engines, without transmissions, without structure beyond natural chemistry, is this not projection? It could be. But consider what counts as evidence in a cosmic context. If 1 in 1,000 years should see a single interstellar visitor, and we have seen 3 in less than 10, probability itself becomes a kind of evidence. If sequences of such arrivals appear in tandem with cycles of extinction, then timing itself takes on the weight of signal. Sometimes the pattern is the message. This brings us to a deeper and more unsettling speculation. What if extinctions themselves are not purely natural cycles, but engineered intervals, reset moments, written into the history of biospheres to make way for renewal? To imagine this is to tread on the boundary between science and myth, between cosmic biology and theology. Yet the notion persists, whispered in many guises. Ancient texts speak of floods, of fires, of gods who clear the earth. Modern minds translate this into galactic terms. Perhaps advanced civilizations seed worlds with life, then clear them at intervals, allowing evolution to refresh itself. A gardener's pruning, a cosmic farmer's crop rotation. In that light, 3i Atlas would be more than a reminder. It would be part of a schedule. The great extinctions of the past would not be accidents of geology alone, but chapters in an intentional design. A pattern by which intelligence manages the experiment of life. Horrifying, perhaps, if true, yet also strangely reassuring, for it would mean life on Earth is not isolated but tended, however harshly. Of course, such speculations rest on thin ground, perhaps too thin. But they also invite us to ask, what would it mean if cycles are real but not blind? What if the galactic thread is not merely physical but purposeful? Let us picture again our ship at sea, entering the crowded waters of the galactic current. If debris drifts thickly, then wreckage is inevitable. But what if among the debris are also bottles cast with messages? What if the flotsam is not only hazard but signal? An interstellar object then is not just driftwood, it is also a letter. Perhaps the letter contains only one line, "You are not alone," and perhaps that is all we need. For the greatest silence of the universe is not in the absence of impact, nor in the absence of catastrophe, but in the absence of acknowledgement. To know that others exist, or even to suspect it from patterns in the sky, changes how we see ourselves. It makes us less solitary, even when the cosmos remains indifferent. There is, however, another possibility, that the sequence is not message but test. To send objects into a planetary system is to see whether the inhabitants notice. Do they track trajectories? Do they measure spectra? Do they publish data? Do they wonder? In this view, 3i Atlas is less communication and more observation. The act of our recognition, or failure to recognise, has becomes the signal returned, a silent dialogue in which we are both the audience and the reply. If so, then what we say in response is not words but action. Our telescopes aimed, our papers written, our debates stirred. Already, in discussing Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3i Atlas, we have responded. Already we have shown that we are capable of pattern recognition, of speculation, of humility before improbability. Perhaps that is the answer that was sought all along, but let us not fall only into fear or awe. There is another way to see this procession, as continuity. Life on Earth is the product of countless extinctions, each clearing the way for what followed. If interstellar visitors are reminders of those cycles, then they also remind us that renewal is possible. The gardener's pruning does not end the garden, it keeps it alive. If life is seeded from beyond, then perhaps each extinction is not an end, but a chance for new growth, new complexity, new consciousness. This one then becomes not only a messenger of doom, but a herald of potential. What then should we do with such a message? Not panic, for panic misunderstands the scale. Not dismiss, for dismissal blinds us to pattern. Perhaps the answer lies in reverence. Not religious in the old sense, but reverence as attention. To watch carefully, to record, to imagine, to hold in mind the possibility that we are participants in a story larger than extinction, and larger than ourselves. And in doing so, perhaps we fulfill the hidden purpose of the message. For if interstellar visitors are intended to awaken awareness, then awareness is the reply. In seeing the pattern, in naming the thread, we become part of it. So we look up at 3i Atlas with wonder and unease. It may be stone, it may be ice, it may be nothing but coincidence, but it may also be something else. A sign that cycles are not random, that endings are not aimless, that even silence can carry meaning. Whether it is coincidence or communication, we are changed by considering it. And in that change lies the quiet power of the message itself. For much of this journey we have looked upward, tracing comets and asteroids and the slow arcs of interstellar visitors. But perhaps the greater story lies not only in the sky, but in the fragile web stretched across Earth itself, a web we mistake for permanent, yet which may be far more delicate than stone, ice, or orbit. For civilizations are not undone only by fire from above, they unravel when their own networks falter. Think of how thoroughly our daily lives depend upon connections invisible to the eye. A pulse of electricity across copper, a signal beamed to satellites orbiting hundreds of kilometers above, a clock synchronized with others thousands of kilometers away. Each of these links is slender, yet together they hold up entire economies. Remove one and the others falter. Pull enough threads and the whole weave collapses. This is the nature of fragility. What appears robust from afar can crumble when one small piece is lost. History offers its reminders. The Bronze Age collapse was not caused by a single invader or a single drought, but by a convergence, famine, trade breakdown, sea peoples, political unrest. Rome did not fall with one sack alone, but with a long erosion of supply lines, leadership and confidence. Collapses rarely announce themselves with a single dramatic blow. They unfold through cascades, and once a cascade begins, it accelerates, each failing system pulling down another. Now place this perspective beside the cosmic alignments of 2025. Imagine a solar storm of Carrington scale striking at the very moment satellites are tasked with monitoring comets and asteroids. Power grids buckle, communication stutters, markets freeze. Perhaps no asteroid touches Earth. Perhaps every rock misses by millions of kilometers. and yet society reels all the same. The hazard is not only in the impact itself, but in the timing, in how disruption coincides with vulnerability. Our ancestors feared comets as omens because they coincided with famine, plague, or war. Today, the omen is not mystical but infrastructural. A disrupted harvest from climate extremes, a strained supply chain from global tensions, an overextended grid running on narrow margins. In such a context, even a minor cosmic nudge, dust in the atmosphere from a comet, a temporary GPS outage, a power loss from geomagnetic storms, can cascade through fragile systems until daily life falters. Consider a single example: global positioning satellites. To most, GPS means navigation on a phone. But in truth, those signals synchronize banking transactions, stock markets, shipping routes, aviation paths. A sudden loss of GPS is not inconvenience, it is paralysis. Add to this the fragility of just-in-time logistics, where warehouses carry only days of stock. If deliveries stumble, shelves empty, not in months but in weeks. The collapse is not apocalyptic fire but quiet hunger. In this sense, the modern world may be more vulnerable than the ancient. Dinosaurs did not depend on satellites. Trilobites did not rely on global finance. Their extinction required impacts of unimaginable scale. Ours may require only a convergence of smaller shocks, timed with uncanny precision. We stand upon a tower built high but narrow. Its strength is undeniable, its achievements extraordinary, but its balance is delicate. A tremor can topple it. Think of how a single volcanic eruption in 1815 Tambora created the year without a summer. Crops failed from China to Europe to the Americas, famine followed, migration surged. That was without the internet, without satellites, without globalized trade. Today, a single Tambora might not only chill skies, but fracture the electronic nervous system of civilization itself. A comet's dust tail intersecting Earth's atmosphere could create similar cooling, while geomagnetic storms cut power and sever coordination. It does not require a dinosaur killer to unravel our networks. It requires convergence at the wrong moment. And this is the heart of fragility. Resilience depends not only on strength but on timing. A stone can withstand countless blows, but shatter with one strike at its point of weakness. Civilizations are the same. Most days they endure, absorbing shocks with little consequence. But let several shocks arrive together: climate strain, political unrest, economic fragility, solar storm, comet dust, and the system shifts from robust to brittle in a heartbeat. Collapse, when it comes, is rarely linear. It is sudden, cascading, unstoppable. It is tempting to believe that technology protects us, that satellites and sensors and predictive models render us safe. But what if they are the very points of weakness? What if the progress that seems like armour is instead glass? The Carrington event occurred in 1859, when electrical infrastructure was rudimentary. Telegraph lines sparked, some operators stunned, messages garbled. Repeat such an event today, and aircraft lose guidance, power grids fry, internet collapses. Progress has made us wealthier, but also more exposed. Let us imagine, then, a night in the near future. Solar flares ripple across Earth's magnetosphere. Satellites flicker, some failing, some tumbling out of orbit. At the same time, a comet, one of the 7 bright in the swarm of 2025, sends fragments streaking into the atmosphere. Not catastrophic, but enough to alarm. News spreads, distorted by outages, amplified by fear. Markets seize, borders close. Within days, trade falters. Within weeks, cities feel the pinch of scarcity. And all the while, no asteroid has struck, no fireball has ended the biosphere. Only networks have collapsed. The extinction begins not with impact, but with unravelling. To see this clearly is not despair. It is recognition. Fragility is not doom. It is a condition. And conditions can be changed. But first they must be acknowledged. To see the sky crowded with comets and visitors is to see hazard. To see our systems crowded with dependencies and fragilities is to see risk of another kind. Both skies are connected, both can converge, and perhaps the true extinction cycle is not the cycle of rocks and impacts alone, but the cycle of civilizations rising, overextending, collapsing, and leaving the field for renewal. The question then is whether we will be another in that sequence, or whether awareness allows us to break the pattern. But that reflection belongs to the next step. For now, it is enough to recognize that the fragility is real, that cascades begin quietly, and that even without fire from above, collapse can come from within. If fragility is the condition, then cascades are the expression. A civilization does not fall all at once, though history often tells it that way. The stories we remember compress centuries into moments, names into symbols, endings into singular events. But when collapse arrives, it does so like dominoes, one system tipping into another, each push accelerating the next. Picture a future not defined by an asteroid's impact crater, but by the quieter impact of silence. A silence in the skies as satellites wink out one by one. A silence in the markets as data stops flowing and banks freeze transactions. A silence in homes as power grids darken and supply chains stutter. These silences would not be dramatic at first. They would be inconvenient, frustrating, temporary seeming. But in the convergence of silences, the cascade begins. Consider the way a geomagnetic storm could coincide with a fragile climate season. Crops already stressed by drought are brought to failure by disrupted irrigation systems and transport delays. Food scarcity pushes markets into panic. Prices spike, unrest spreads. Governments respond with emergency powers, but communication is fractured. Fear compounds fear. Within months, what began as a space weather event merges with economic collapse and political breakdown. Not extinction in a geological sense, but collapse in a civilizational one. Yet to those living through it, the distinction may blur. This is the unsettling lesson of fragility. The extinction cycle does not require planetary sterilization. It does not require a Chicxulub impact or a Permian-scale flood basalt. It requires only that our tightly coupled systems be nudged at the wrong moment. The cascade does the rest. A minor asteroid fragment detonating in the atmosphere above a city, no worse than Chelyabinsk, could trigger global shock if it coincided with outages, shortages, and mistrust. The physical event may wound only buildings. The cascade may wound civilization itself. From this perspective, the next extinction cycle may be less about biosphere and more about culture. We often think of extinction as the end of species, the silencing of trilobites or dinosaurs. But what of languages, technologies, traditions? A collapse of networks could erase not humanity, but humanity as we know it. The continuity of memory, the archive of our knowledge, the fragile scaffolding of our world. These could vanish even if bodies survive. Survival of the species is not survival of the civilization, and civilization is what carries meaning across generations. Let us step further into the scenario. Imagine a cometary fragment streaking across the sky during a solar maximum. It burns in the atmosphere, spectacular but not deadly. Yet media channels, already strained by outages, spread rumour and panic. Is this the first strike of many? Is it the harbinger of a larger body to come? In the absence of reliable data, fear outpaces fact. Panic buying empties stores, flights are grounded, misinformation floods the void. Governments, uncertain and defensive, may act with heavy hands. Borders tighten, cooperation frays, the cascade accelerates. What makes cascades so powerful is their unpredictability. They do not follow a neat line. They bend, twist, jump from one domain to another. Economic unrest becomes political turmoil. Political turmoil disrupts science. Disrupted science weakens the very systems that might have offered protection. Each step is logical in hindsight, but chaotic in the moment. This is why civilizations rarely recognize collapse until it is well underway. The dominoes fall too quickly to trace. And yet, this does not mean collapse is inevitable. It means collapse is conditional. It depends upon timing, upon convergence, upon resonance between weaknesses. Awareness of fragility allows for preparation, and preparation can dampen cascades. But awareness requires imagination, the ability to see not only the asteroid in the sky, but the silences that ripple outward when networks fail. To think in terms of chain reactions, not single strikes. Philosophically, this reshapes how we understand extinction. Extinction has always been framed as a brute event, a sudden ending. But perhaps for civilizations, extinction is more subtle. It is the unravelling of meaning, the fragmentation of memory, the erosion of coherence. In that sense, collapse is already a form of extinction, even if species persist. For what is a civilization if not the continuity of shared memory? Lose that, and what survives is something else entirely, perhaps still human, but no longer this humanity. From this vantage, the question is not only will we survive, but what will survive of us? Will our knowledge remain accessible, or will it fade into ruins and whispers? Will our languages endure, or will they fracture into new dialects spoken by scattered survivors? Will the memory of satellites, networks, and global interconnection seem miraculous myth to future generations? In every collapse, there is continuity, but continuity is not identity. The chain reaction transforms, and what emerges may be unrecognizable to those who lived before. Still, even here there is possibility. If extinction cycles reset the biosphere, perhaps civilizational cascades reset culture. The loss is profound, but the opportunity for renewal remains. Out of collapse may grow resilience, simplicity, or entirely new forms of organization. The question is whether we can imagine renewal before collapse, or whether we must first fall to rediscover what endures. Perhaps this is the message hidden in the convergences of 2025. Not only that cosmic hazards are real, but that fragility is real. That resilience is not measured by strength alone, but by the ability to withstand cascades. That extinction in the modern age may be less about comets and more about connections. If we can learn this lesson, then perhaps awareness itself is the first dampener of the chain reaction. Perhaps recognition is the beginning of resilience. And so we return to the thought with which this part began. Silence. The silence of satellites, of markets, of power lines. Silence that seems ordinary, temporary, but which can converge into collapse. To recognize that silence before it grows is to prepare. To ignore it is to be undone by it. In the end, the chain reactions that shape civilizations may be as powerful as the impacts that shape planets. Both can end an age. Both can begin another. Extinction is never only about what is lost. It is also about what remains. Each cycle that has overturned life on Earth has left traces, not just in the absences carved into the tree of life, but in the signatures preserved in stone, in air, in ice. The Ordovician seas that receded, the Devonian reefs that fell silent, the Permian deserts that burned. They are still with us, not alive, but remembered in the strata beneath our feet. Fossils are not only remnants, they are messages across time written in bone and shell and carbon. In them, memory becomes survival of a different kind. Our planet is a library of such memories. Ice cores preserve bubbles of atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago, tiny prisons of ancient air that whisper of climates and catastrophes. Tree rings carry the marks of droughts, of volcanic winters, of strange seasons when sunlight dimmed. Even the scars in the crust, craters, spherules, shocked quartz, are inscriptions of impacts long past. The Earth itself remembers in ways more patient than our fleeting lives allow. To read these records is to commune with the memory of extinction, to glimpse how the planet has endured what species could not. But memory is not confined to geology. Humanity too carries memory and story. Myths of floods, fires, and celestial omens echo across cultures, separated by continents yet bound by theme. Perhaps they are coincidences, products of universal imagination. Perhaps they are distorted recollections of real disasters, tsunamis, eruptions, impacts, transmuted into tale and ritual. Either way, they show that memory is not only physical but cultural. The survival of a people is not only in their bodies but in their stories, which can persist even when cities fall. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of floods. Norse tales speak of winters that end the world. Mesoamerican codices show fire raining from the sky. None of these texts are geological records, but they are cultural fossils, fragments of how human beings experience catastrophe. They endure in the same way craters endure, as reminders carved not into stone but into imagination. If civilizations fall, it is often their myths that outlast them, keeping alive not the details of what occurred, but the emotional truth of what it felt like to live at the edge of collapse. Today, we add our own layers to this archive. Satellites circle the Earth, carrying petabytes of data, maps, images, entire civilizations stored in fragile electronics. Libraries digitize knowledge into code. DNA vaults freeze genetic blueprints. Seed banks guard the future of agriculture against catastrophe. We are, more than any species before us, archivists of ourselves. We build repositories on mountaintops and in frozen vaults, hoping that when disaster comes, fragments will endure. It is a remarkable instinct, to prepare not only to survive, but to be remembered. Yet fragility haunts even our archives. A solar storm could wipe satellites. A war could scatter databases. A rising sea could drown vaults. The question is not whether we can store memory, but whether that memory will survive the cycle, for memory has its limits. What we remember is not always what matters, and what matters is not always what we remember. The dinosaurs, after all, left no myths of their own. Their memory is written only in stone, and it took millions of years for another mind to interpret it. What of us? Will our servers be fossils of silicon shards? Will our stories, etched into a few surviving books or carved into monuments, be all that remains? Or will we manage to preserve not only record but meaning, the continuity of thought that allows one generation to speak to another across extinction's gulf? This brings us to a deeper question. What does it mean to survive? Biologically, survival means persistence of DNA. But civilizations are not measured only in genes. They are measured in continuity of culture, of memory, of story. If humanity passes through the next cycle reduced in number, but holding on to its archives, myths, and lessons, is that not also survival? Perhaps survival is not only biological, perhaps it is archival. Perhaps memory is the true seed that carries across extinctions, sprouting new forms when the world allows. Seen this way, extinction cycles are not only endings but edits. They erase, but they also preserve. They compress, distill, and leave behind fragments that later lives may rediscover. To stand at the edge of a cycle is therefore to face not only the risk of loss, but the responsibility of memory. What will we choose to inscribe in the strata of our time? What messages will we leave for those who follow, whether they are our descendants, or strangers, or perhaps no one at all? The comets of 2025, the interstellar visitors, the sudden alignments, they may pass without disaster. The world may continue. The cycle may turn gently this time. Or perhaps the cycle will tighten and renewal will require pruning. Either way, the meaning of the moment is clear. We are living in a chapter that will be remembered, by rock or by myth or by archive. We may not control the outcome, but we can choose what we send forward. And in that choice lies our quiet power. For if extinction is inevitable, memory is optional. The Earth will remember in its own way, But whether our words, our knowledge, our stories endure is up to us. If we fail, then we become like the trilobites, silent fossils in stone. If we succeed, then even in extinction, something of us continues. Memory becomes survival. And survival, in this broader sense, is not measured in bodies alone, but in echoes that carry forward. We can already glimpse the outlines of how this might unfold. Imagine a small group of survivors, generations from now, finding fragments of our time. An etched disc, a vault of seeds, a myth about a sky once crowded with comets. To them it may seem miraculous, a message from the past reaching across the silence. That message would remind them that they too are part of a cycle, but also part of a lineage of memory. In this way, even if our age ends, it does not vanish. It becomes part of the chorus of voices that made us possible, and perhaps will make others possible in turn. If memory is survival, then reflection is its companion. To remember is one thing, to understand what memory means is another. Extinction cycles, interstellar visitors, fragile civilizations, all of these are chapters in a story larger than us. But memory transforms these from random events into a narrative. It is memory that binds them, gives them shape, allows us to see not only what has been lost, but what might yet be preserved. And here is where we stand, at the edge of a cycle, with the sky crowded, our systems stretched thin, and our archives fuller than any before us. We are the first species to see extinction not only as history, but as possibility, to anticipate rather than only endure. We know the Ordovician seas drained, the Devonian reefs vanished, the Permian deserts spread, the Cretaceous asteroid struck. We know these were not singular, isolated tragedies, but part of a rhythm, and in knowing, we are changed. This knowledge is itself a kind of survival. The trilobites could not remember. The dinosaurs could not anticipate. We can. That alone gives us a sliver of agency in a cosmos where much is beyond our control. Perhaps we cannot prevent cycles. Perhaps the comets and asteroids and interstellar visitors will continue their convergences no matter what we do. But to see them as cycles, to understand them as patterns, to recognize ourselves as part of a larger rhythm, that is the beginning of stepping outside. Some have wondered whether other civilizations before us have reached this threshold. If the galaxy is filled with life, then perhaps others too have faced alignments of comets, storms, and interstellar threads. Did they collapse unknowing, or did they leave markers behind? Were they archivists like us, carving memory into stone, storing seeds in vaults, sending messages into space? Perhaps we are their inheritors without knowing, just as future species may one day inherit our traces. To live at the edge of a cycle is also to live in the presence of others, unseen but implied, through the very structure of survival. Extinction, then, becomes punctuation in a larger text. Each cycle closes a sentence, pauses a paragraph, shifts the tone of the story. And memory is what allows the text to continue, rather than to dissolve into silence. To see extinctions as punctuation is to soften their finality. They are not absolute erasures, but structural turns, setting the stage for what comes after. Life itself is the proof. Every extinction has been followed by renewal. Not the same life, not the same forms, but continuity nonetheless. In this frame, 3i Atlas becomes more than an object. It becomes a symbol, a reminder of the punctuation that shapes the story of Earth. Its interstellar trajectory links us to a galactic rhythm. Its presence in the crowded sky of 2025 reminds us of the convergences that have defined past endings. Whether it is a coincidence of orbit or a deliberate signal, it functions the same way. It draws our attention to the cycle we inhabit. It asks us to look backward and forward at once, to see ourselves as characters in a narrative older than memory but not beyond comprehension. And so, as we stand beneath a sky that feels suddenly crowded, we are confronted with a dual reflection of what has been and of what might be. The Ordovician seas, the Devonian reefs, the Permian deserts, the Cretaceous impact. Each is a mirror held up to us. They say, you're not permanent, you're part of a rhythm older than yourself. But they also say, renewal follows, the world continues, the page turns. Perhaps this is the truest meaning of the swarm of 2025, of Three-Eye Atlas threading silently through it. Not doom, not salvation, but reminder. The reminder that cycles are larger than us, that endings are real, that beginnings are possible. The reminder that we are temporary, but not meaningless. The reminder that even in extinction, life carries something forward, and that something may yet be enough. The past extinctions watch us now. They are not abstract history. They are the chorus of endings that made us possible. They whisper from the rocks, from the fossils, from the chemical scars in the crust. You are next, but you're not alone. Others have fallen, others have endured. The cycle is not judgment. It is simply the turning of the page. And in that whisper lies the final reflection, that to live at the edge of a cycle is not to despair, but to recognize one's place in a story far larger than survival. The comets will pass, the asteroids will fade, the sun will quiet, and Three-Eye Atlas will vanish into interstellar dark. But the memory of this convergence will endure, just as the memory of every extinction endures. Whether we endure with it remains uncertain. But to know we are part of that memory is itself a form of immortality. Perhaps that is the closest to eternity we may ever hold, not in the unbroken survival of our species, but in the continuity of memory, geological, cultural, archival, that binds the cycles together. We are fragile, but we are also witnesses. We are temporary, but we are also storytellers. And in telling, in remembering, we leave marks that may outlast us. So let this crowded sky be not only omen, not only warning, but also reminder of what we can preserve. For even if the page turns, even if this chapter closes, memory can carry forward. And as long as memory survives, something of us survives. That is enough. That is survival.